In this video, we're talking about reducing your taxes legally as a YouTuber. So if you have a YouTube channel or a YouTube related business like I do, what can you do to legally reduce the taxes that you pay on your income, whether it's just lowering them a little bit or potentially getting them all the way down close to 0%, because as a YouTuber, it's actually very difficult or even impossible to get fully 0% tax. But in this video, I will give you the optimal tax setup if you are a YouTuber and a couple of different options based on your preferences and your income sources and things like that, so that you understand everything you need to understand about taxes as a YouTuber. And why should you listen to me? Well, I actually run 2 profitable YouTube channels, and I personally pay a total of around 0.5% tax on all of this income fully legally. And on this channel, I help online business owners reduce their taxes legally by relocating to more tax-friendly countries. I help people choose different business structures and things like that, find residency programs, citizenship programs around the world. So if these kinds of topics interest you in general, there's a lot more free content on this channel on all of these topics. And just as a note, this video generally applies to non-Americans, because if you are an American, regardless of what you do, where you go, the US is still going to tax you. You can still follow these steps to reduce your taxes, but there will always be some tax to pay, and there's going to be some extra considerations for American citizens. So I'm probably going to make a whole separate video on that. So first, the key to reducing taxes in general, in case you're new to this topic, is that you have to relocate to a more tax favorable country. Usually what you would do is simply look at countries that have low corporate taxes and or low personal taxes. Usually, generally for online business owners, the easiest place and the one that makes by far the most sense is going to be the UAE, usually the city of Dubai. Why does it make sense? Well, they have 0% corporate tax if you are a small business, 9% corporate tax if you are a bigger business, and they have 0% capital gains tax, 0% personal income tax as well. And it's also very, very easy to get residency. This is actually where I live as a YouTuber, and I've eliminated all my taxes on almost all of my income. There's some extra consideration that we'll talk about in a moment. And if you're interested in making this same move, and later on I will discuss when this makes sense for you as a YouTuber, I also work with an agency who I've been working with for the past 3 years, who's helped more than 800 people go through the process of actually leaving your country and relocating to the UAE. So if you're interested in this setup in particular, which we'll discuss in more detail in a moment, you can book a free consultation with my team down below, who can take you through the process, answer any of your specific questions, and they can essentially take it from there. But now I'm already hearing some of you saying that there is one thing that specifically as a YouTuber is not super optimal when it comes to going to the UAE, and that is the issue of the US Adsense withholding tax. So if you're not familiar with what this means, essentially the extra thing that you always need to consider as a YouTuber is that if you make AdSense income, so you get paid by the YouTube ads directly, the US actually applies by default 30% withholding tax on US-based AdSense income. That is, unless the country where you are resident and the US have a tax treaty where they've eliminated this withholding tax. So for example, if you live in the UK or in Australia or in Canada or a lot of the Western countries that I imagine a lot of people watching this are coming from, you're probably not used to paying any of this withholding tax because you are from a country that has a tax treaty with the US. However, the UAE and the US do not have a tax treaty, meaning that yes, all US-based AdSense income that you make will be subject to a 30% withholding tax. So this can potentially be a reason why you might actually not want to move to the UAE, because if you have a very large proportion of your income that is coming from AdSense, then this might very well be that your tax rate is not even going to be close to 0 like it would be for other kinds of business owners. And this is the reason why previously I said that my income tax rate in total is around 0.5%, not 0%, because I do make some of my income from AdSense. Now, luckily for me, AdSense is actually a very, very small part of my income, which is why this overall tax rate is only 0.5% rather than 30%. But for those of you where AdSense is a big part of your income, like if you are an entertainment channel or something like that, where you rely on getting a lot of views, then this is something that you should definitely be aware of and consider when making your decision. So before I talk about specific countries where you might want to go in this case. Let's just talk about how you can potentially reduce this withholding tax, or rather how you cannot reduce it, because there's a lot of things people will think that, oh, I can just do this and not have to pay this tax. For example, people will think that, oh, I will just set up a company in the UK, or I will set up a US LLC, register my AdSense account for this company that is in either the US or the UK or Canada or something. And because there is a tax treaty between, for example, the UK and the US, voila, that means you don't have to pay that withholding tax. But unfortunately, that is not how it works. That is not legal at all. Why is that? Well, because these countries have essentially figured this out. Withholding tax depends on the country of tax residence of the beneficial owner. So if it's you personally, it's going to be your personal tax residence. And if it's through a company, it's going to be the company's tax residence that determines which country's tax treaty you can apply. So even if you register a company in the UK and you put this AdSense account under this account, what you have to declare is where this UK company is actually tax resident. And even if you form that company in the UK and you run it from the UAE, it is still going to be treated as a UAE tax resident, unless you like hire a manager for it in the UK and you actually genuinely like don't manage your YouTube channel from the UAE, which is probably unlikely. So this is at the very best a very much of a gray area, and in my opinion, it is not something that is legal. The other thing that people might say that you can do, well, I'll just leave my AdSense account to my previous country. I'm not going to make the UAE AdSense account, and that way I can avoid it. Again, you can probably do that and they might not find out, but it is not legal, and I always recommend staying legal. If they do ever find out, the IRS is not something that you want to mess with, essentially. So if you live in a country like the UAE that does not have a US tax treaty, what you need to understand is that there is no legal way for you to avoid paying this withholding tax. What you simply need to determine is this enough of a problem to consider some other place over the UAE? And I would actually say that in most cases, despite of this withholding tax, the UAE is still going to be the best place for you to move to. And I'm now going to explain why that is. The first reason, obviously, is that for a lot of YouTubers who have educational businesses like I do, AdSense is a very, very small part of my income. So any other types of income, like income from your infra products, sponsorships, from affiliate income, unless it is classed as a royalty, and it is specifically a royalty from a US company. And this is what the AdSense income is, by the way. It is classed as a royalty from a US resident company, which is Google. Therefore, US is applying this withholding tax on it. For any other type of income, you are not going to have to pay any withholding tax. So if you're in a situation where you make $100,000 a year or month or whatever, and $1,000 a month or year from AdSense, only 1% of your income is going to have to pay this withholding tax. The other reason is that this 30% withholding tax does not apply to all of your AdSense income. It only applies to your US sourced AdSense income. This is very, very important to understand. So let's say you make $3,000 a month from AdSense, but only 1/3 of your audience is in the US. So you get $1,000 of the AdSense from US viewers and you get $2,000 elsewhere in the world. The withholding tax is only going to be applied on that $1,000. So your total withholding tax is going to be 30% of $1,000, so $300 a month, which gives you an effective withholding tax rate of 10% rather than 30%. So this withholding tax only really becomes a problem if you have a very high proportion of your total income from AdSense, and on top of that, a very high proportion of that AdSense income is from US viewers. And in most cases, this is not going to be the case. But if you are in this scenario, well, what you can look at is this list right here, which you can find from the PwC website of US withholding tax rates. This gives you a list of the countries that have a tax treaty with the US. And what you want to look at specifically is this last part here of royalties. And out of all these numbers, you want to look at this last number over here. And you can look through this list of countries. And what you will realize is that a lot of these are high tax countries. So there's actually not that many options out there where you can get low withholding tax as well as low corporate tax. Because what you need to remember is that it's not just the withholding tax that you need to worry about. Even if you don't have to pay withholding tax, like living in the UK, then on top of that, you're going to have to pay UK corporate taxes. And then on top of that, personal income taxes in the UK on that income. It doesn't mean that it's now exempt from taxes in your home country of residence. Some options that you can find here are, for example, Cyprus. That might make sense. Cyprus has a corporate tax rate of 12%. 12.5%. So if you have calculated that your total effective tax rate would be more than 12.5%, Malta, I believe, is another one. You can get quite low corporate taxes there, I believe, and you only pay 10% withholding tax. But other than that, there's not that many other options out there that are low tax and have the 0% withholding tax. You could, for example, look at a country like Thailand. They have 5%, but Thailand then has 35% income tax. So it's still going to be much higher than just going to the UAE. So that is why I would say that if you are a YouTuber and you want a tax optimal setup, the UAE most often makes sense. And if you want to move to the UAE, all you have to do essentially is set up a company in the UAE. It's going to be a free zone company most likely. Then you set up your AdSense and you essentially move all of your income to that UAE company. Then you give yourself a job via this UAE company. You get yourself a residence visa. And as long as you live for at least 90 days in the UAE, you get tax residence in the UAE. And then on top of that, as long as you don't spend enough time in any other country to become taxable there, so let's say you spend less than 3 months in the UK, at least 3 months in the UAE, and then you perhaps spend 5 months in Thailand and 1 month traveling somewhere, that means you're not taxable in any other country but the UAE, and the UAE will apply their 0% corporate or 9% corporate in some cases and 0% personal income tax on you, and then you simply pay that very low amount of withholding tax that is going to be withheld automatically from your AdSense income, and that is going to be most likely the lowest tax that you can achieve. In my case, the total tax rate that I calculated comes out to around 0.5%, but I hope that this video was helpful to you. If you want to hear more information about how you can specifically move to the UAE, if that is the one that you have now chosen to go with, you can watch this video right here for my full guide on moving to the UAE. With that said, I will see you in the next video.